Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today on our webinar, Speed to Profit. Today, we're talking about something that every Amazon seller wants, which is getting products into Amazon faster while making more money. But speed is not just an operations metric anymore. It directly impacts cash flow, profitability, inventory health, and ultimately your ability to grow. So today, we're going to look at both sides of that equation, how to accelerate inventory through the FBA network, and how those operational improvements translate into stronger financial performance. So my name is Colleen Quattlebaum. I'm the head of marketing at ConnectBooks. And joining me for this conversation today are two industry experts. We have Nachman Lieser from ConnectBooks. He is the founder at ConnectBooks. Say hello, Nachman.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for putting this together.
Yes. And then from ZonPrep, we have the head of sales, Lou Casados. So hello, Lou.
Hello. Yeah, great to be here. Excited to talk through these two topics. And as Nachman said, thanks for organizing, Colleen. Appreciate it.
Sure. Well, we're looking forward to diving into these topics. Just kind of a brief overview of things that we'll be discussing today include why speed matters for Amazon sellers, practical ways to get inventory through FBA faster, how velocity impacts cash flow, and how to not just reduce, but even eliminate inbound placement fees and reduce storage fees. And we'll share some tips to prevent stockouts. And also, with Q4 being right around the corner, we're going to talk about what sellers should be doing now to prepare for that peak season. And just a couple of housekeeping issues. We are recording this webinar, so we'll be sure to send out the recording afterwards to everybody via email. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We're happy to answer any questions throughout the webinar. And then we also have time at the end. And so feel free, again, just to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will be sure to address them. All right, so without further ado, let's just jump into our first topic, which is why speed matters. So, Lou, why should Amazon sellers care about speed to market? What's changed over the past few years that makes this even more important than ever today?
Yeah, a lot, right? Quite frankly, I think the easy answer is that inventory sitting in a warehouse or storage or an FC transfer isn't helping you. It's not making you any money. It's tied up capital essentially, right? Just sitting on the shelves. So one, sales velocity is critical. In terms of speed into the network itself, prime eligibility is very important, right? Getting those products actually prime eligible, geographically distributed in a place where a customer can hit order. I believe conversion rates improve by 23% or more on products that are prime eligible versus not. And the big change really over the last couple of years was the regionalization of Amazon's fulfillment network. You talk to sellers from 4 or 5 years ago, and they remember this really fond, amazing period where you could just send everything to Amazon and they would distribute it, and it was no charge, and it was great, and it was rainbows and lollipops and all that. But in 2024, essentially, Amazon really formalized the regionalization of their fulfillment network, and they introduced the inbound placement fee. Right. So now, and we'll talk about what this looks like, but essentially, Amazon's really pushing sellers to move towards more optimized fulfillment. So instead of sending to one location, sending to multiple, and this is going to improve not only your check-in times usually, but also your time to prime eligibility. So all of those reasons, right? And then obviously the financial perspective that hits the bottom line just from slow speeds in general.
Right. So, from a financial perspective, Nachman, what does an extra week of inventory sitting in transit actually cost a business?
Yeah, so this is a very important question. And the thing why I actually like this question is that when everybody looks at their finances, whenever I talk to business owners, first question is like, how much money did I make last month, right? How much did you make? Did you make 100,000, 500,000, right? How much money did you make? And everybody's always looking it into profits. But the challenge is that when you have extra inventory that's tying up your cash, that's making you make less money. And that's not something you can really see because cash, you mean to say if you don't have enough money now to buy more inventory, then essentially you're selling less and you're making less profits. So for illustration purposes, we're gonna have an example over here on the slide is that let's say you're carrying $2 million worth of inventory. And let's say you're flipping your inventory every 90 days. So that means that you have around 3 months worth of inventory. Okay.
Very
So if you take 2 million divided by 12, you're approximately 100, you have $166,000 locked into inventory that's not really making you more money. The idea is that because you have additional stock, meaning we're assuming that the products are selling the best, mean to say once your products like come to a certain line where they're properly selling, the point is that if you could make the same amount of money with less inventory, then you have more money in your pocket, which you can use that money to buy more products or buy maybe different investments or different stuff. So technically 1 extra week, it sounds like very little, right? And that's where on the left side of the slide, you see it says, the cost that everyone calculates is like 5,800, right? It's like a certain amount of cost that people don't really think like, what the financing is, like how much interest it's going to cost them. It's like more of like an expense side. But when you look at it from a cash perspective, and in this case, where most sellers carry like at least $1 million to $2 million worth of inventory. So if you're carrying 2 million of inventory, you're flipping it every 90 days. That means on average you have $166,000 stock per week, which if that can be eliminated, you have additional $166,000, to use to buy more merchandise. Now, if you're carrying a $10 million inventory, then you just got to take 166 and times that by 5.
Yeah. And I would say even outside of just purchasing more merchandise, that can be money that's reallocated to ad optimizations, to PPC, right? To ways that actually drive more conversions and drive more top line revenue growth for you as well. Really, really powerful to see it laid out like that, though.
Yeah. And Nachman, this cash being trapped in the warehouse, explain to us what's on this slide, what you're trying to demonstrate here as well about the
So
numbers.
this goes more about to discuss more about inventory age. So really, this is more like on meaning the previous example was more like where if you were to just minimize 1 week, what kind of impact would that have? And that would be more about having a better process of faster optimization. But in terms of like inventory age, which is a very big topic that, which I always talk about. And what I always tell people is that when it comes to inventory, when it comes to finances, everybody always asks, how much money did I make last week? Or how much did I make last month? But then the question is when you ask somebody how much inventory you have in hand, most times the answer is they don't know. Now, even when I found somebody who did know, next question was, okay, so can you tell me how much is laying here past 90 days, past 180 days? This is most of the times I haven't found people who can have like a clear answer. Like, I'm not talking about clear, I'm talking about roughly. Give us like rough numbers. You're sitting on. Now, this is a pretty decent sized seller, doing around like 70 million a year, where we did an analysis and they were sitting on $9 million worth of inventory. But the scary part is not the 9 million. I have no problem with 9 million in inventory. My scary part is more if you look at the bottom number, the 2.6, right? So what's this 2.6? The 2.6 is everything past 180 days. Now, originally I tell people try to go for 90 days, but I'm gonna close my eyes a little bit on this one. Let's say even they would keep only 6 months worth of stock, they have additional 2.6 on inventory, which is 900,000, which is between 180 and 270, 600,000 between 270 and 365, and they have additional million, which is above 365 days plus. So the challenge a lot of people have, and always tells like when you buy a product, what goes in your mind? What goes in your mind is that, hey, I'm buying this for 50,000, I'm going to resell this for 100 and make 50,000 profit, right? The challenge is if you never sell the product, then that product is considered a loss. So that's really where it gets very, very challenging if you don't sell. Now, the real question is, how do you have proper visibility into your inventory, understanding which are moving fast, which are moving slow, and that's really where the inventory age comes into play. The inventory age comes into play more where you wanna where you wanna have complete visibility, more and from a finance side, it's gonna be more of a dollar perspective, not so much of a quantity, not so much of the goods. It's more of a dollar perspective is how much cash do I have tied up in inventory that's laying in my warehouse for more than 180 days or more than a year, right? And what you want to do is try to start liquidating that inventory and trying to figure out a way where you basically make sure nothing lays above 90 days. So idea is that, with ConnectBooks, one of the things we focus on is building out a proper inventory age. And this is just like a demo, like illustration of what it looks like. But the idea is to have this clarity and to know these numbers in seconds. Like it shouldn't be something, oh, now I got to run 5 different spreadsheets and spend 5 weeks in this and coming back with a number. Because by the time you come back with the number is already obsolete. It's something that you want to just click a button and see right away.
Yeah. So slow moving inventory is obviously very costly, as well as, the speed to getting it to FBA can be costly if you're not moving fast enough. So let's talk about increasing velocity. Lou, what are some ways that sellers can move inventory faster through the FBA process?
Right. Well, I think, it's an interesting question because you're kind of at the mercy of Amazon in a lot of ways, right? But it's really about what are the areas of the business that you're controlling, right? And when we think about the areas that you have control over with your FBA inbound, supply chain strategy is, well, number one, how are you sending into Amazon today? Right? Are you choosing to send to one location and paying placement fees and having Amazon split that for you? That could be the best situation for some folks. It really depends case to case. It's definitely the slowest, right, process of getting a product through the network, and we'll explain why. Or are you selecting, the optimized split and sending to 5 locations, which is going to be the fastest way to get product inbounded into the FBA network. So when we talk about like fastest way, those two areas, what's in your control. I think we have a slide here that illustrates because this is what takes place when you're paying placement fees in option one, which I think most people know this, but when you really see it broken down, it makes you start to think, well, I'm usually just optimizing for a cost. Like for most brands we talk to, they're making the choice saying, okay, well, if I pay placement fees, it's X amount of dollars. If I send optimized, it's X amount of dollars. The placement fee is cheaper than it is to send 5 LTL shipments across the country. So I'm going to go with placement. And then in their minds, they're like, oh, well, I'm making strategic decisions because I chose the cheaper cost. But in reality, you're really paying what we call an operational tax because of that FC transfer time. So this is what the flow looks like, right? Starts in your warehouse, wherever that may be, when you pay placement fees. From there, it gets received at a national inbound cross-dock center. This is a sorting center, essentially. Amazon's going to run its algorithms and determine where your products need to end up. So once it gets into the national and receiving, technically the products are sellable, but it's really a misrepresentation of the product's ability to sell because they're not going to be prime eligible until that final stop, the fulfillment center. So this shows up in Seller Central. I know you've all seen it before, right? As FC transfer, you got the, anywhere from 10 to 20 different locations with all the different with different codes. As they're getting to those locations, that's ultimately when that shipment and those products become prime eligible. So the total process for that to take place from getting checked in to the majority of your products becoming prime eligible when paying placement fees, that's going to take about 43 days, right? So when you go back to Nachman talking about, just tied up capital in general, when you talk about tied up capital in FBA specifically, it's a double whammy because you're paying the storage costs on it, right? Typically, if you're taking 43 days for the FC transfer process to complete, realistically, you're probably carrying 90 to 120 days of on hand just in case to make sure you don't go out of stock on those ASINs. And then once we get into Q3 and Q4, in most categories, you're going to see a 3x increase in storage costs. So you're going to carry, again, financial bloat on top of the operational tax that you're paying when paying placement fees. So that's option one to get product into Amazon, right? And again, in some cases, it does make sense, but if you're in any way, shape, or form able to optimize and send optimized shipments in, you really want to do that because you're essentially bypassing the national inbound cross-dock center, going straight to the regional inbound cross-dock center, which is going to cut off generally 20 days or so off of that FC transfer and inbound process. And the benefits that you'll see with that, obviously, faster time to prime eligibility. This right here, we're looking at an actual example from a supplement brand. They send annually just under 3,000 pallets into FBA, so pretty substantial volumes, right? Prior to working with us, it took them 19 days from when they created a shipment for that to get checked in at Amazon and starting the receiving process, right? So 19 days. Now, this brand was paying placement fees about a good percentage of the time, about 40% of the time, as you can see here in that next number. And then you'll notice the 26 days, that 40% of the time is representing when they're paying placement. That 6 to 8 days is 60% of the time when they're optimizing their shipments. So again, when you have that choice of either paying placement fees or optimizing, I think this illustrates really well the benefits of optimizing, because you can see the 60% of the time that their products are becoming prime eligible far, far faster than not.
Right. And so then, Nachman, once the inventory starts moving faster, the financial picture changes too, right? So what improvements do you typically see when it comes to forecasting when things are moving faster?
Well, one things move faster is that, number one, you get high, you unlock a certain amount of cash, which would help you in terms of like, constantly being replenished and, having the right amount of cash. It just helps you make an easier forecast in terms of like when, when you want to know how much to purchase. Like saying if you have like a certain amount of days that you want to keep it on and you want to just keep on moving it, it's just gonna make it much easier on that end. And it's also gonna help you, it's also gonna mean to say, what I always say is like the thing that you want to try to move is sometimes they say you have like a quick nickel is better than a slow dollar. It's more like where you start to move it at a certain pace where you can actually, you want to, what the real example is like you want to constantly replenish FBA on a consistent basis where like how much you want to send in every week and you keep on sending it in weekly. And the problem is that when stuff gets stuck in FC transfer, it's like kind of a limbo. So what people end up doing is they end up sending in for like, let's say 2 months at a time versus let's say if they can work at a schedule where they can get it into FBA very predictable and send it, let's say 1 week at a time, or send like and constantly have shipments going, then that helps a lot on their cash flow because they're moving a consistent amount of inventory, the same amount every single week on time. It's not like, boom, now we're going to stack them for 2 months. Okay, now we have no more money left. Now we have to start waiting. It's where you're very consistent and you move it better.
Yeah, and I think consistency across the board is the key word there that he's pointing out, right? Like when you can get consistent in all of your operational motions, you can be more efficient, right? So if you know, hey, no matter what, it takes 5 days for my products to get checked in, and consistently I'm achieving prime eligibility in 10 days or less. Well, that changes, to Nachman's point, your entire replenishment strategy. That changes how you're ordering, how you're going to market. Also, depending on your category, speed into Amazon from that perspective is critical with product launches. Getting strong data on new products in, right, is just another, I think, improvement that you can talk to as well with forecasting. But it's hands down, I think, the toughest part of managing the Amazon channel is the forecasting, the inventory management, getting it down. I think a lot of that is because of the ambiguity of the inbound process, right? Like, and especially nowadays where you have folks, because placement fees, that's not breaking news anymore, right? That's like 2 years old. Everyone knows about this. And now people are either at the point where they're starting to optimize a percentage of the time or not, but that inconsistency in how they're going to market there is actually giving them unreliable data in terms of their inventory planning, right? Because they see one shipment gets checked in 5 days, and then another shipment gets checked in 14 days, and one shipment becomes prem eligible in 8 days, and another one becomes prem eligible in 43 days. And so you're not thinking strategic. You're just like, okay, send 120 days of on-hand inventory to cover because then we won't run out of stock, right? And I think that's like going back to the previous conversation, the goal as a strategic Amazon operator should be to run as lean as possible, right? Like as lean as possible. There's this sweet spot where you're just above getting charged for low inventory levels, but below, below the point where you're not going to run out of stock, essentially. So, I think that these two solutions together, the consistency of inbound times and then the visibility into your inventory levels, really gives operators a competitive advantage in an area of the business that's historically one of the more difficult ones to manage strategically and efficiently.
Yeah, forecasting is definitely tricky. I mean, we talked about inventory age and aged inventory and how that, becomes costly and expensive, but also stockouts can be incredibly expensive as well. So what are some common reasons that you see that sellers are running out of inventory even when they think that they've planned correctly?
Yeah. It varies. And I think every seller supply chain is unique, right? And just like a little snowflake. Every seller has their own unique problems. But I think some of the bigger misconceptions and the easier ones to pinpoint are like number one, your prep delays, right? If you're not handling prep internally and you're outsourcing to a partner, whether that's item level prep at an F&SKU level, transparency level, kitting, bundling, those types of projects are typically where we see really long delays because it requires you to take an item, individually label it, item it, rebox it, carton label, then get out, create shipment plans. We talked to a lot of sellers where their current partner there is they're seeing anywhere from 5 days to sometimes 14 days before the project's even complete and out to Amazon. That's going to obviously add a lot of delay time for you there. But I think the bigger misconception is just again what we talked about, the shipping and the flow and how you're actually sending product into Amazon. Because again, that delay in the FC transfer process just takes so much time. If you can cut that placement fee tax out, I think you see a lot of benefits there. So prep delays, eliminate those. Eliminate inefficient modes of getting product into Amazon, right? Once you make the choice to eliminate placement fees, then you have the option of, okay, well, how am I sending into Amazon, right? If you send LTL, that's going to be obviously slower than sending like an SPD or small parcel delivery in. But again, if we're talking about preventing stockouts, the goal is speed. So it may make sense to go ahead and just pay the premium to get product in there. What we do for our clients and why clients choose, frankly, to partner with us, especially in Q4, is we're eliminating this threat of stock out by the fast feeds into Amazon. So now instead of the brand having to choose between slow LTL shipment or high cost for SPD, sending a palletized shipment in that way optimized, they can say, you know what, we're gonna actually just send everything to ZonPrep and we're sending floor-loaded FTLs into Amazon's regional facilities that get inbounded immediately. So now, when you talk about like preventing a stock out, if you as a seller had a choice, right? If you had an option anyway to send every shipment as a floor-loaded FTL, 99.9% of sellers are going to be like, yes, absolutely, no brainer, right? The problem is the scale. You don't have the actual scale to achieve that on a consistent basis, right? So if you do have the scale, and you can accomplish sending full trucks, but you're just sending smaller, quicker replenishments, then the trick for you would be consolidation internally. Hold back trucks, wait, and send bigger replenishments in optimized that way you can get those live unload appointments. And again, if you're not able to achieve live unload appointments at an optimized level, then work with a partner like us that can. But I think those are the big issues that an operational side can prevent stockouts from, just the prep SLAs, and then most efficiently getting your product into Amazon as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Thanks. And Nachman, when it comes to stockouts, obviously lost sales, is obvious when you stock out, but what are some of the other financial consequences that you see that sellers don't always think about when it comes to stockouts?
Yeah, stockouts creates a lot of like it creates like a certain amount of chaos in the company. One thing is I'll say like let's say when you stock out from China or you stock out locally, either way, let's say, for example, when you don't adequately stock your products accordingly. If you have to bring your stuff by ear, that costs a ton of money. The bigger challenge is when even when you have like and even when you have stock over here in the US, like you have like a backup 3PL, or you're using like where you constantly keep like certain amount of backup material, backup products in order to reload FBA. One of the biggest challenges is that you lose your rank, which everybody knows. When you lose your rank, the challenge is that you need to spend a lot of money to get that back accordingly. So even when you do like have like some sort of replenishment, and you want to like now you want to start like bringing in a lot of a lot of different stuff, you have to, number one, build up your rank organically the way you've done it in the past. You have to also start spending a lot more money on ads, and then you also want to make sure that once you get back that rank, you can also move back to your profit margin. What I've seen many times is that sometimes people lose their rank, and then they have to work really hard to get it back. But then when they get it back, their margins are not the same. Like their A costs went from 20% to 25%, which is not good. Sometimes even 1 or 2% has a huge impact on the bottom line, especially when you're dealing with $1 million or $2 million in sales. So what happens is when with Amazon, when you don't have that proper stock, and the real challenge also is like Lou was saying, is getting your stuff in Prime eligible, getting your stuff in fast, getting your stuff in on time has a huge impact in terms of like, to making sure that your sales are consistent and your sales are there. So, bringing those two together to making sure that you always have the stuff there on time, that's really gonna, constantly help you, in terms of making more money.
Yeah.
And all of these challenges that we're talking about, they're really exacerbated when it comes to Q4 during that peak holiday season. So, Lou, as we head towards, the holiday Q4 selling season, what should sellers be doing now to avoid expensive mistakes that could come about?
Yeah, I think, this sounds very elementary in 101, but I think just getting a full understanding, first off, of what your actual costs are on your supply chain. And I think a lot of times that's not a number that's looked at deep enough, right? But really understanding down to a per pallet level, what is my per pallet fee? How much does it cost to ship to Amazon? How much does it cost to prep? How much is that? Either get it down to a unit or a per pallet level, however your organization works. Understand there, your finance, your economics. From there, there's some operational motions that I think are often overlooked. Again, you do need some consistency in volumes and planning to be able to pull these levers. But getting in locked in rates on your lanes is a great way to keep volatile freight costs down, right? Going to your freight brokers and saying, hey, we're anticipating X amount of volume from this lane to this lane in Q4. What can you do for us? And then hitting those volumes is a great way to make sure that you're minimizing your costs. Inventory, understanding your timing, understanding your velocity, right? How quick are you actually selling versus how fast are things becoming available for sale? What are your check-in times? And I would say a very overlooked one is your prep efficiency in terms of your weights and dims, right? If you're using poly bags, for example, is there a lot of slack in your prep that's giving up unnecessary dimensional readings at Amazon, causing you to pay bigger FBA fulfillment fees than you should? There was one client we ran an analysis for, a rather large enterprise brand, but because of inefficient prep, that client was spending over $2 million annually in fees that they didn't need to spend, right? Purely because of 6 inches in excess slack on certain items. So making sure your prep is efficient. And then I would say, this is really becoming more and more popular, of course, with transparency, but focusing on IP and brand protection. Enrolling in transparency, I think, is again a very personal decision based on the brand, right? If you're in supplements, if you have counterfeit issues, right? If you have consumables, anything that you can be easily counterfeited, highly recommend going through that process and getting the transparency program instituted into your ASINs and SKUs. And then, of course, it becomes the operational leg of how do we execute that and get those labels applied. But outside of what we've talked about, faster inbound times, I would say those are things that you can go and look at your current efficiencies and say, How am I doing there? And if there are gaps, reach out and let's talk. We have, ways to fill those really, really quickly. We can onboard a new client in 15 minutes or less and give you a full analysis of your FBA prep and operations and supply chain really, really quickly.
Great. Thanks, Lou. And as far as Q4 goes, Nachman, what advice do you have in terms of when and how sellers should begin planning for Q4?
Well, it's a really good question. But one of the things is what I would say is everybody's always busy budgeting for Q4. I say you got to budget all year round as well. One of the things is I like is that you want to be certain consistent with your cash flow in terms of understanding when you're going to need more money, when you're going to need less money. You want to constantly budget across, understanding like for now, let's say we're working with certain clients that we help them a little more than one-on-one, where they didn't properly budget for Q4. And what's happening is that, certain stuff are getting delayed just because they haven't run the proper cash flow analysis. The reason why they haven't run the proper cash flow analysis is because they never had proper bookkeeping. So the idea really is that you want to be in a mode where you want to know every single month how much you're going to need for the next 3 months, not like, minds of the last minute. And if you get used to working in such a cycle, Q4 is no different. One of the things I do want to highlight a lot about Q4 is really there's certain industries that don't make money in Q4. It's mainly like a lot of times what you see, like obviously toys, games, those skyrocket Q4. But then there's certain stuff that are pretty flat through Q4. Where they're like, for example, home and goods usually are more like, they're pretty more like flat all year round. So some sellers make, it's quite different. Like it's quite interesting. Sometimes we see customers that don't really make too much money throughout the year, but Q4 they make so much money that it's just worth it for that. And sometimes it's people who make money throughout the year, but Q4 is nothing better. And then we have also seen that some people Q4 don't really make money. And then the reason is why don't they make money Q4? The answer is that there's certain fees that go up crazy in Q4. So let's say, for example, storage fees. The storage fees are actually triple the price in Q4. If you're going to look back, for example, if you use a software like ConnectBooks, where you can see your storage fee on an item level on certain products, what ends up happening is you have much more storage fee in Q4 than you have through Q1, 2, and 3. So then the real question becomes, you have to be smart with this because certain products might not be worth it to sell through Q4. Now, then the challenge is obviously you also don't want to lose your rank. You obviously don't want to lose certain stuff. So what you want to do is you want to really understand what I always tell people is we'll look at Q3 and then we want to understand how well will these products do? And then we have to take into account like what's going to happen if you lose a rank and advertising and all that. Now, there's sometimes certain interesting scenarios where sometimes people don't want to remove certain products because if they remove meaning there's removal fees and other fees to remove it. So like, oh, let's just sell out and just forget about it. The challenge is in Q4 that sellout can be expensive, where sometimes it might be cheaper to actually remove the product from FBA than actually working on a slot. Now, what we have rolled out over here, what you can see is we call it a profit simulator. So what this profit simulator does is you can, run the report as you see on the top for any time frame you want. Once you run the time frame, you can take actually that product and then you could say, okay, how would my profit be impacted based on having 3 times the storage fee? Now, what the unique thing about this calculator is that number one, where it's different than most calculators out there, this is based off your actual data. Basically, when we pull in this data and we pull in Q3, we're pulling in the settlement report, the date range report, all the different reports. This is your actual numbers based on, based on what happened in Q2 or Q3, whatever date range you choose. Now, so that's the most accurate gets. Because a lot of times what I've seen many profit calculators, they miss certain fees, which are, sometimes certain stuff get missed. Or for example, let's say you run the Amazon calculator, right? You don't know you don't know what ads is going to cost you. You can estimate like, let's say ads will cost me, I don't know, let's say $1,000. But meanwhile, it costs you 1,500 or vice versa, it costs you 750. When you take actual numbers from Q3, this is the actual numbers you made. Based on these profits, if I was to take the storage fee, which you have like a button called edit fees, and when you edit the fees, it's going to pop out all the different storage fees. If I were to take the storage fees, triple that amount, how am I going to look? And that's really what you want to see. And you want to make sure that, you manage your profitability and you still make money through Q4.
So speaking of fees, everyone wants to avoid the unnecessary Amazon fees. So Lou, what are some of the biggest opportunities sellers have today to reduce or even avoid placement and storage fees?
Yeah, so I think reducing the amount of storage, number one, right, is the way to reduce your storage fees. The only way you can do that is by getting product into Amazon's network faster and products Prime eligible faster. The only way to do that consistently, is to avoid paying the inbound placement fee, right? So I think that right there is your biggest lever at reducing the fees. Now, how you go about actually eliminating the inbound placement fee, that's easy, right? You just select optimize shipments and send to 5 regionals. What's harder is actually executing on that if you're not at a position where you can send consistent LTL or FTL volume into those 5 regionals, right? Or if you don't want to send LTL volume, rather, in that situation. But so in our situation, what we would do is it would start at your warehouse, and pardon, there's a typo there on the top. This would be when you're not paying placement fees, but that start at your warehouse again. You would create your optimized shipments in Seller Central. You then select and consolidate all of those shipments into one truck instead of 5 different LTL shipments or 5 SPD shipments, just one truck. You send that to our facility in Georgia. We'll then receive those pallets. We're going to consolidate them with other sellers going to the same regional facility. And our inbound times, from our facilities into Amazon are well under 5 days. For the month of June, we were averaging, just over 36 hours from an inbound from Amazon to, from ZonPrep to Amazon. So I think eliminating placement by shipping optimized is going to have a huge trickle down effect that will ultimately lower storage costs. And then the other area that we talked about was just super efficient prep with your products. If you're using poly bags, I can pretty much guarantee you're overpaying on prep right now, like pretty much guarantee it. So if that's the case, like let's run an analysis, let's take a look and let's see how efficient you can get. But I would say those are the two biggest levers that folks can pull going into Q4.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely take advantage of that. I put in a link in the chat of an opportunity analysis where you can talk to ZonPrep and they can talk with you and analyze your situation, see how they can save you money. So Nachman, when it comes to Amazon fees, how do these show up in the financials? Are there certain reports that sellers should monitor? What's usually a surprise to sellers that maybe they're not looking at fees properly?
Well, there's always going to be surprises, but the real thing that I always say is that, the first thing that every person needs to have is a proper set of books. Having a proper set of books is where, sometimes people ask me like, oh, looking at this dashboard, I know what my profit is. The answer is that you want to set yourself up a set of books, real question is, what is QuickBooks? QuickBooks is an accounting tool that matches up your bank, which we make sure that every dollar that comes in and every dollar that goes out is properly accounted for. So that's not a big deal to do. The challenge what happens is when you want to get all that Amazon data properly into QuickBooks along with your finances in the side. So that's how, when you look at the bottom number, you really see a number that actually matters. And that's really what you want to focus on as a whole. And once you understand, like, okay, number one, I always say, is your business making money? It shouldn't be like maybe. It's a yes or no question. And then the answer is, okay, if yes, then let's see which products are making more money, which products are making less money, and then let's try to cut out the waste and double down on the ones that do well. If your business is not making money, then the real question is, what is it causing you to lose money? Is it going to be too much ad spend, placement fees, storage fees? Like what is ruining you to do that? And then we want to see, how can we help you bring up those margins? What are the good levers you're going to pull? But the first thing that you always have to keep in mind, it really starts with having a proper set of books where you really see the bottom line, because a lot of times those dashboards that you see don't really paint the real picture. One of the main challenges is that they don't integrate to the bank. They don't see the full picture. They don't see everything. That's why it's so important to have a proper set of books where you really see the full picture. You see everything that's going on in your business. Once you understand what's going on in your business, that's when, you want to take a deeper dive and, start to see which levers you want to pull.
Great, thank you. And the last topic that we're going to cover, then we'll jump into some exclusive offers that we have for everybody joining today. We've talked a lot about cash flow. It's something that's, every business worries about and is top of mind. But Nachman, any final tips that you want to share about cash flow or improving inventory velocity to improve cash flow?
Well, the real thing is what I would say is like what we at ConnectBooks focus is we focus on your business as a whole, right? We're not when I talk with a seller, right, am I gonna, here and there will say, hey, these products are not doing well, these products are not doing well. But the thing that I always go to customers is first thing is the business as a whole, right? Like I said before, first question is your business making money? Now, when your business is making money, the next question is where's that money going? That's a big challenge. I've seen many times customers saying, well, on this dashboard shows I'm making $100,000 a month, but my bank account is empty, right? So where's all that money going? And that's really where, what I would say it boils down to the like what we call the ConnectBooks has like in ConnectBooks, you have three pillars, right? First thing is having a proper set of books, which you have your proper profit and loss, which shows you your income, and then you have your balance sheet. Your balance sheet is really how you build out a cash flow statement, which would, if your business makes money, the cash flow statement will show you the movement of money and where the money is going to. Once you understand your business as a whole, then the next step is to dig in deeper. Okay, so now I understand how much money my business is making. Let's see which products are making money and which products are losing money. And then the third step would be to dig in deeper is that which products are not moving as fast, right? So for example, if you have products that are draining your cash flow, for example, we once worked with a customer who made, they did $22 million in sales, 1.4 million in net income. So additionally, you would say, wow, this is such a great business. But the challenge was in the bank, there was no money. So what ended up happening was, where did that 1.4 million in cash go to? The answer is went back into inventory. Now, in the beginning of the year, they had 3 million of inventory. In the end of the year, they had 6 million. So the challenge is these people bought a lot more inventory than they were selling, but they weren't realizing because they were moving so much volume. So what ends up happening is when you don't have the proper visibility, even if you're making a lot of money, your money could still get drained and still get buried in the wrong places. What I say is the goal is to make 1.4 million net income, start off the year with 3 million in inventory and end with 3 million, not with 6.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. And then Lou, as far as cash flow goes, from an operational standpoint, what do you see that tends to have the biggest impact on cash flow?
Yeah, I think the most simple answer is just is speed, like right, like speed into speed to sellable, speed to prem eligible, and speed to being in stock, like Nachman mentioned, and understanding then the visibility portion of where your inventory sits and the rest of your business. Like it's a black box oftentimes and siloed and kept in different reporting areas and all that. And I think once you have a strategy and a lever that you can pull that says, okay, I know I'm getting in fast, then you can start to do the optimization and reverse engineer and say, okay, because of the visibility that we have from, say, a tool like ConnectBooks, where am I bloated? Where can we start to run more lean? Where can we start to cut? And where can we start to be more efficient? So I think speed is king. It always will be, no matter what, right? And then you with that comes and with that power comes great responsibility and good insights and being able to choose which areas of the business you want to ultimately improve faster.
Yep, speed is king and cash is king.
Exactly.
So, all right, well, we'll definitely open it up for some questions. So feel free to ask questions. But I wanted to share some special offers. I'll turn it over to Lou to share the offer from ZonPrep, and I'll pop it in the chat as well.
Yeah, so Colleen put in there a link to where you can, go ahead and submit to get a proper opportunity analysis. Consists of you running a Chrome extension we've developed. Will present a side by side of your current FBA operations. If it's compelling, and you want to run that through a pressure test, we're happy to offer you a $10,000 shipment credit on your first shipment with ZonPrep as a new client. So if you're interested in taking advantage of that, please check out that link there or shoot me a DM on LinkedIn directly, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great. And from ConnectBooks, we are offering 25% off your first 3 months. You do get a 30-day free trial as well anytime you try ConnectBooks, but just for this month of August, if you sign up this month, you'll also get 25% off your first 3 months. Just be sure to use the coupon code SPEED2PROFIT. And this is good for the first 5 signups only. So go ahead and jump on that. And we have a great support team that can help you get onboarded and answer any questions that you have. But yeah, so now we'll go ahead and jump into any questions that come in. So let me see. All right, so we do have one question here on how do you know if you have a good Amazon inbound strategy? So Lou, I think that one's for you.
Yeah, I think first start is understanding like what is your check-in times, what's your receiving times look like today, right? If your average check-in time is less than 7 days, or shipment creation to check-in at Amazon and receiving is less than 7 days, I would say you have a good strategy, right? That can probably be improved again with just looking at how you're sending and where you're sending. But that's number one. Number two is, do you have an idea of your actual costs going back? Like, do you understand what your per pallet costs are, how much you're spending on a per unit level? If you have that understanding, that's a good. Right, I put that in the good category as well from an inbound strategy. Now, if you have those two boxes in place, I'd say now the time saying where can we go from good to great? How can we reduce those inbound times? How can we get faster time to prime? How can we potentially lower the on-hand inventory we're carrying? And then you also need to look at your current processes that your team is spending time on. Like, do you have your team spending time booking 5 LTL shipments, chasing carriers around, finding PODs, that sort of thing, right? Like, I would argue that's probably not the best use of time for a supply chain team. But if that is the case, there's probably improvements to be made there. So I'd start at just the metrics you can identify, which is inbound times, get a little deeper time to prime, and then look at your current team makeup and what their bandwidth looks like. And if you're saying, hey, there's definitely some improvements that we want to evaluate, let us take a look.
Okay. And at ZonPrep, what are the timelines that you typically see for clients when it comes to FBA check-in?
Yeah, it's so on average, right, like for the month of June, when products left our facility, check-in time was just over 36 hours, about 37 hours, right? We quote 5 days year round as an SLA from when products get to us to when they'll get to Amazon. And that's 5 days regardless of the year or regardless of the time of year, right? So whether it's Prime Day, whether it's Prime Big Deal Days coming up in October, back to school, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you name it, Q4 peak, you're going to see really fast check-in times. But we'll always quote 5 days or less. And again, 36 hours is what clients are seeing right now.
And Nachman, can you talk about the onboarding process for ConnectBooks? What does that time typically take?
So the onboarding process in ConnectBooks is pretty simple and easy. One of the things, we do differently than other places that we actually have real bookkeepers and accountants doing the onboarding. So from when you sign up to ConnectBooks, you have two parts. One is to choose the inventory, which, that depends on you, how well you're going to be organized in terms of setting up your SKUs. But if you have like some sort of Excel sheet with SKUs, with a SKU list and something like that, that's going to be very straightforward. And then in terms of accounting, when we actually start connecting ConnectBooks to QuickBooks, we actually it's not like a technical person. It's actually an accountant who will walk you through that process. And they will make sure that you understand how the data flows into QuickBooks and making sure that you understand you do things the right way. Not that after you finish setting up ConnectBooks, it's like going to be, you want to really be able to read your numbers and understand your numbers. And that's really where, you would get great support in terms of, sending over that data correctly.
Okay, great. And one more question here for Lou. How does volume and velocity affect the best inbound mix for Amazon?
Yeah, so I think the shorter answer it is the more volume that you can send at any given time unlocks some key benefits like live unload appointments, right? So for example, if you can send consistent FTLs, full truckloads into Amazon, then you can schedule a live unload appointment, which means you're going to get faster check-in times. Now that right there is a huge benefit as to why folks are leveraging us, because oftentimes most brands are not going to achieve a situation where they're sending FTLs on every single FBA shipment, right? So that's the easiest. And then I'd say in terms of optimization itself, one kind of gotcha here, you need to make sure that you're able to send at least 5 boxes per SKU, obviously, to achieve the split across the 5 regional facilities that Amazon will send your products to. Right. So I think those 2 variables are the biggest. As long as you have the assortment to achieve 5 boxes per SKU, great. Then becomes how much volume can I actually send to kind of force Amazon's hand. An additional lever that we pull to even make our receiving times faster at Amazon is we send floor loaded FTLs into Amazon. And why that matters is because a floor load forces immediate receiving at Amazon's facilities at the regionals because of how they receive. So they bring a conveyor belt out to the actual truck, and then they just start putting boxes onto the truck. So it has to be received immediately, right? Versus if you send a palletized load into Amazon, even as an FTL, for example, those pallets can get sidelined and pushed off to the side while another teammate comes and depalletizes and puts them back into the receiving lane. So there's a lot of like nerdy considerations to think about when you're sending in, right? But like the best way to do it is sending floor loaded FTLs into Amazon. And if you can't do it yourself, simple, just let us do it for you. Really simple.
Yep, ZonPrep is the expert. You guys have really figured it out. So great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. If you have any other additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. And if you have interest in either ZonPrep or ConnectBooks, highly recommend. It's worth at least just a call and talk to ZonPrep team, do the opportunity analysis, talk to the ConnectBooks team, and we can take a look at your situation and see how we can save you money in the long run and make you more money, especially in Q4. But yeah, thanks to Lou and Nachman for joining today and for all of your expertise. And yeah, hope everybody has a great Q4.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks, Nachman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.